Yeah, I was trying to tell you that, uh, you know, there are instances of social contract apart from these three people. One person who we can talk about when talking about social contract is John Rawls. And I'm aware of the fact that we have only done a sketchy version of Rawlsian liberalism in political ideologies. Uh, but I hope you do remember, because some of the key words that Rawls uses uh, signify a social contract. In fact, it's not a derivation that we identify certain words and say, this is the social contract, or this is like the social contract. Rawls himself will tell you that this is what the social contract is, and what is it that is in his philosophy that is akin to the state of nature, which is an integral part of the social contract mechanism, the state of nature. So Rawls calls his original position, if you remember, we had talked about that. Um he calls that uh, original position the state of nature, or the equivalent of the state of nature, and the veil of ignorance is what morally informs people who are in the original position, and it is from there that when they decide that uh, justice is something which has to be understood as opportunities being given equally and fairly to all, and justice is fairness. The arrival at that particular conclusion, that justice is fairness, is what Rawls calls the social contract. Well, so you can see that most of the time, not most of the time, all the time, when people have talked about social contract, they have actually talked about it as an experimental method. Okay, the suppositions that are there are those which are of an experimental nature. But perhaps the first philosopher that we know of, the proto-modern philosopher, Machiavelli. Machiavelli is, really speaking, the first thinker who carried out an experiment as far as his thought is concerned. This is not applicable to his work, the discourses, or the discorsi, as it is in Latin. It is applicable to the prince or il principe. Now, what is the experiment that is being carried out by, let's say, Machiavelli first? Machiavelli is carrying out an experiment which is called I hope you remember the resolutive compositive method. I had given you the example of a clock and what the Paduans and the resolutive compositive method is one of the nascent scientific methods, and it is assumed that the Paduans are the people who first carried this out with the intention of proving that even if you did not create something, you can still understand it. So the resolutive compositive method, if you remember, has two components. Uh, the first component is the breaking down of a complex into its what should I say, breaking down of its of a complex into its simple parts. When we talk about the simple parts, we are saying that something which is in the nature of a mechanism is put together by various different parts in a specific manner, not randomly. And this is something that produces the complex. So in the resolutive compositive method, we begin with the unintelligible complex. We'll stick to the example of the clock. We didn't create the clock. That's what the Paduans said. We didn't create the clock, so it is unintelligible, complex. It is something that we don't understand. Now, so do we leave it at that? They say no. What we do is that we break it down into simples, into its parts, and you break it down into what they call the rock bottom simples, which means that a part cannot further be broken down. You cannot take that part out as one piece anymore. If you break that, then it ceases to be that part. Okay, so that's called a rock bottom simple. So you have to disassemble the complex, the unintelligible complex. You have to disassemble to the point that it is down to its rock bottom simples, to the point that it is down to its rock bottom simples. So if it is down to the rock bottom simples, then what do? You don't, by the way, pull it down arbitrarily. You keep a note of how the whole thing is being disassembled. You refer back to that note on how you have uh, disassembled, and using that note, you reassemble. So the disassembly part is the resolutive part, the resolution. So what are the parts? I told you you can break a clock down of that particular period. It would have been a very big clock. You will break it down into wheels, gears, pulleys, strings, pendulums, needles, dial, and the way in which all these are assembled in order to make the clock work. So you disassemble these first, and then you reassemble. When you reassemble, you get an idea of how the clock is working, how the different gears in the clock are connected to the serrated circles, how they move with the help of strings, and then there'll be clutches which will uh, release the pulley at a specific interval. So that is supported by a spring that is wound in such a way that it makes sure that the clutch unclutches at a time, at a regular interval. And that is how the clock will show the time. So, because of the resolutive compositive method, you have moved from the unintelligible complex to the intelligible complex. Now, what I want you to remember here is the fact that I basically want you to remember the fact that while this resolutive-compositive method, while the resolution and the composition are happening, people don't know about it. Okay? People, those who are not a part of the team that is using this method, they know nothing about it. They are only told that this is how a clock works. They don't know what was the process that went into the disassembly. How did they start the disassembly? And mind you, it is not a straightforward process. Okay, you might have started the disassembly in a particular manner, and instead of ending with rock bottom simples, you might have ended up with something else, in which case you have to carry out the disassembly again. So this is not something that is done in one go. Please remember that. It is not something that is done in one go. It has to be done a few times. The first few times you'll get it wrong. Even after you get it right, you still have to basically, what should I say? You still have to have this uh, validation of the process. So to validate it, you'll have to do it 2 or 3 times more, or you have to do it again and again till you're satisfied that you have done it correctly. The reason why I'm going into this particular detail is because often when we are looking at anything in science, okay, if we are looking at anything in science, we are under the impression, we are absolutely under the impression that uh, we, the whole process of creation of something or the understanding of something is a pretty straightforward kind of thing. It is something that does not require uh, complete attention of people. So the thing that you need to look at is the messy part, which is the resolution part. That is really messy. Okay, it's very, very messy. And that mess is hidden from the people to whom you show the effects of your experiments. Hey, shut up. If you, please, doggies, shut up. So if you basically, if you basically, Vaishnavi, no, 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 no. Come here, come here. లేదమ్మా I'm sorry about that. Yeah, so the messy part is hidden. And so people generally think that the progress of science is a rather smooth affair. But you have to understand that even if you're building anything, any instrument, a vehicle, you always need a prototype on which you carry out several different experiments before you finally settle on the configuration of that instrument. It is not something that is over in a day. For example, if you take uh, the designing to building of an automobile, it is a process that takes anywhere between 3 to 6 years. It, if you're starting with a clean slate, then it takes longer. But even if you're trying to improve an existing product, that itself will also take not less than 1.5 to 2 years. So you see, most of the time we get to see the finished product. We don't get to see the experiments that have been done on it, how people have experimented with that product, what all did it go through, how bad did it look, or how bad was it, or unreliable was it in some of the configurations used. We don't know all that. Now, this is true of the adoption of the scientific method, even by philosophers. Machiavelli was the first philosopher to have possibly adopted this scientific method. Obviously, this was in Italy. He was an Italian. And the method that he used is what people call logical abstraction. He never told anybody that I am using a method which is uh, logical abstraction. On the face of it, the Prince seems a simple enough book, but in getting to write that book, in getting to arrange the information, there is a great deal of experimentation that goes on. And I can say this because I have written books. You suddenly realize, say your book has some 8 or 9 chapters, you suddenly realize that you're saying something in the 8th chapter which would possibly be better in the 3rd chapter. You realize that, and then you try to put it in the 3rd chapter. And when you put it in the 3rd chapter, it might so happen that the 8th chapter is now no longer making sense. It's now not making sense the way it should. But the 3rd chapter is enriched. So what do you do now? So you have to find a way of leaving the 3rd chapter enriched, but also doing something in the eighth chapter in lieu of what you have taken out from there. You may have to re-articulate that in a different way, in a different form, so that it doesn't seem repetitive. And that is how you will experiment. You will experiment before you realize that the book is now a finished product, and that the arguments that you're making in the book are those which are flowing logically throughout the book without bumps and speed breakers and detours, without all those things. Um, so that is something which is a must for every writer. In fact, this is not only the case in for writing academic books, uh, it is also a case for writing even novels. I don't know if you heard of this writer, a pretty famous novelist, but since this is a generation that is averse to books and reading, uh, this particular book is actually, this particular author, his name is John Le Carre. John L-E-Le C-R-R-I-E with an accent. So John Le Carre is his name. And in an interview on BBC television channel, not the radio, uh, he was asked, how does he write his books? Does he, before writing the book, does he plan out? Does he kind of say that the twists and turns that will come in the book are already planned out? And does he actually add them as, okay, this is what I planned and now let me write? He says, no, it is not done that way. He says, no writer writes like that. It's not just me. You might have a beginning and an end in your mind. What is it that you want to say through your novel? If it's a suspense thriller, Le Carre wrote mainly suspense thrillers. So is it that you have the idea that you're going to write a suspense thriller, and it's only after you start writing that the ideas start flowing? That is why I tell all my students who are doing PhD that this is a wrong thing that you have. That let me read and read, and you're reading for what? The question becomes, you're reading for what? Because nobody is writing their books according to the necessity of your thesis. Nobody's writing a book as per your necessities. So if you read and read, yeah, you've read a lot of things, and it has not in any way contributed to your writing. For 2 years, you read books, and then you say, right, now I'll write. And you find that you are exactly at the same place that you were at 2 years ago. You are at the same place where you were 2 years ago. So that kind of reading doesn't help. You have to start writing your arguments and then look for books as you write. You then have to look for books that might provide you with supporting arguments. So the art of writing in itself is experimental. Whether you like it or not, that is the hard truth. It is experimental. It is something that keeps the experiment keeps unfolding while you're writing. Now, Machiavelli's case is slightly different in the sense that what was Machiavelli's purpose? He wanted to establish this activity called political, a distinct realm. He wanted politics, but he realized that there was no police for him to fall back on. The Greeks talked about politike, which is the political, because of the fact that they had a polis. So Machiavelli's task of establishing the political was an extremely difficult task. A task complicated by the fact that philosophy tended to get into the social realm, and the social realm had the ethical in it. And as long as the ethical was a part of the social realm, then the church was going to dominate. So Machiavelli wanted to end the domination of the church. He wanted it out of the activities of the imperium. He wanted it out of the activities of the imperium. So he devised a strategy of reintroducing the word political and politics. Why did he have to do this? So that there would be a disjunction. There would be a complete disjunction between ethics and society. Ethics and society. He wanted that separation. So, what does he do? He brings in politics. And when he's writing The Prince, he's carrying out this logical abstraction. What is an abstraction? An abstraction, in a way, is a subtraction. Okay? In a way, it is a subtraction. Jesus Christ, I have to do something about this. Yeah. So, what is this abstraction that we are talking about? The abstraction that we are talking about is removing something from the picture. Removing something from a picture. Subtracting something and then looking at how the picture would look. So let me give you an example. Let's look at a inner sanctorum of a temple. Okay, the inner sanctorum, which is where it's actually called Garbhagudi, which is where the idol is placed. There's an idol placed there. So what do? If you want to understand the importance of the idol, you can remove the idol from the picture. These are the days of Photoshop, right? Remove the picture of God, put some other picture which may serve whatever purpose you have in mind. That is how you do an abstraction. Sometimes you remove something and not put anything back. Sometimes you put something in place of something else. Just a second, please. I need to attend to this. లోపల మార్చారా డబ్బా పాతది కదా ఇక మన దాంట్లో కొత్త తీసుకునే ఇప్పుడు వాచన చూస్తా రాకపోతే మార్చేస్తాను చూసుకుంటే ఇప్పుడు ఎందుకు డబ్బని పెట్టడం అంటే నేను చూస్తాను వాచన వేస్తే నడుస్తుంది మళ్ళీ నడుస్తుంది మళ్ళీ వచ్చినాక దాంట్లో ఫస్ట్ కూడా లేదు కదా దాన్ని లేదు కదా అది వచ్చినప్పుడు కావాలంటే అప్పుడు చూద్దాం ఏ ఫాసెట్ అంటున్నా దాంట్లో లేదు కదా లేదండి లేదు అదే పోయినది ఇప్పుడు తీసుకొని నా దగ్గర ఉన్నాయి వేస్తారు సెట్ అయితే ఎంతసేపు దాంట్లో ఆ ఫాసెట్ కూడా పెట్టేసే ఒకటి ఫాసెట్ అదే కన్నా పెట్టేయాలంటే నల్ల వేరే చేంజ్ చేయాలి నల్ల తీసేసి అది పెట్టేయాలి నల్ల అంటే పక్క నుంచి తీసుకోవడానికి అది ఒకటి ఉంది కదా కలెక్షన్ కదా ఇప్పుడు 2 in 1 నల్ల పెట్టాలి అదే అంటే అది ఇట్లా టీ వస్తుంది కదా అదే వేసి 2 ముద్దలు చేసేయాలి మళ్ళీ దానికి ఆనవ పెట్టాలి దీనికి ఇది నల్ల పెట్టాలి రైట్ అదే అంటారు దానికి ఆనవ పెట్టాలి కదా పెడితే మళ్ళీ బయటకు వస్తుంది అని ఏం బయటికి రాదు కొంచెం ముందుకు వస్తుంది కొంచెం వస్తుంది చేసేస్తే టీ పెడితే మళ్ళీ ముందుకు వస్తుంది అదే 2 in 1 నల్లలు అయితే ఒకటి ఇప్పుడు మనం అమ్మకు పెట్టినాం కదా అట్లా 2 in 1 నల్ల పెట్టేస్తే అయిపోతుంది అట్లా పెట్టినా సరే కానీ అది ఉండేటట్టు ఇవాళ రేపు అది లేకపోతే అదే మెయిన్ కంపల్సరీ అదే అడుగుతుంది కదా అంత అంటే కంపల్సరీ గన్ను ఉండాలి అది కూడా తెచ్చేయాలి తెచ్చేసి కానీ ఇవాళ అయిపోవాలి my sincere, profound apologies, but I'm facing a crisis and this needs to be done because this man is available only at this time. Thank you for your patience and putting up for me with me. Yeah. So we were talking about how you remove something and put something, and that becomes a removal itself is a subtraction. So that is the kind of thing that Machiavelli is doing. Machiavelli is very, very keen on introducing or reintroducing the word political, politics, these words, and making them the and through them building a realm of governance by a prince and not by a pope. That is what he's doing. And that is the reason why he wants to get rid of the ethical from society. Basically, he wants to get rid of the ethical from society. So how do you do it? If you are Machiavelli, you do this by Start the spelling. I hope you remember the translations. I told you that Koinonia Politicae is an ethical political community, which got translated into Latin as civitas, not civitas, societas civilis. Uh, so that basically, what was that trying to prove? That was, uh, you know, we don't have a police. So why are we talking about the police? So we talk about society. In the Greek language, you don't really find uh, the equivalent of a word which conveys society. And similarly, the polis, the Athenian polis, since the Romans didn't have a polis, they translated that into res publica. I'm told it's actually publica, res publica, which is a republic where people, I told you the triumvirate, I'm not going to go back into those. So, since, and if you remember the story of how Christianity supplanted the Roman Empire, the Roman Empire had conquered vast territories, didn't unite people, and what Greece, what Christ did was that he united people in these united territories. And that was the undoing of the Roman Empire. And this is something that Machiavelli is acutely aware of. He's acutely aware of it. And therefore, he doesn't acknowledge society. He does not acknowledge religion. And I told you this one instance where he talks about some unknown God. Only one instance where he says, Italy beseeches some unknown God to unify the different principalities. So, if we are looking at that thing, what he is trying to do is he's trying to write a book in which there's no mention of anything called society. There's no mention of religion, just one little mention of a non-specific God, some unknown God. You can take it as no mention of God either, but and ethics, no ethics. He doesn't talk about ethics. And if you read The Prince, it's like a user's manual. It's like a user's manual. It is telling, it is advice to a prince on how to govern, how to establish himself, how to rule. And he basically talks about ruling, if necessary, with an iron fist. No tolerance to any rebellion against the prince. So I told you, there is a seeming contradiction because, first and foremost, Machiavelli is saying that the human being is fickle, not always rational, not always rational. He's fickle, he's not rational. He has all these negative qualities. But if that is the man, first type of man, the second type of man is the prince, epitome of leadership, epitome of the spirit, the absolute spirit to maintain order in the principality. no society, maintenance of order in the principality, people being punished for not falling in line. And if you see the slightest indication, if you get to see the slightest indication of a rebellion, or not just rebellion, also some kind of discontent, put it down. Put it down. That is what he's talking about. So you see, this is an experimental work. It's an experimental work, not as in a failed experiment. It's a hugely successful experiment because it did succeed in establishing the political realm. It reintroduced politics. It removed ethics from the picture. And when I start talking about Hobbes, I'll show you the pervading influence of Machiavelli. Let me give you a glimpse. I must have done that many times while we were discussing justice in Rawls. The absence of the ethical is something that you see right up to David Hume, right up to David Hume in the liberal tradition. The classical liberal tradition does not acknowledge ethics. There's no ethics. And I told you this example of when Rawls, what am I saying? Hobbes was asked about what, how he defined justice. His answer was what a community of people think is justice through traditions. If they derive something from that, that is justice. It can be anything. He said it can be anything. Justice is, there is no content in justice. He says, as human beings, we imbue the words with meanings. Otherwise, he says, words have no meanings on their own. Words have no meanings on their own. So what did he say? He said, can you tell me why a dog is called a dog? He said, what is the logical connection between the utterance of the sound dog and the animal which you're calling a dog? Is there a logic to it? Is there a logic to it? There is no logic. There is no logic. It's just being called a dog. So he says, because people are calling it a dog, it's a dog. If people had decided to call it a cat, it would have been called a cat. So I said the same thing with justice. So he said words have no meanings of their own. It is how we imbue words with meanings that matters. And that is the reason why even people like Peter Winch, who would be an exact opposite of Hobbes, is in complete agreement with Hobbes when it comes to the idea of what we call, when he talks about this whole thing called, uh, what do we say? Um, Sorry, got lost. Somebody tell me, what was I talking about?
Peter Winch.
Yeah, thanks. So I assume the others are not there. Right. Yeah. So Peter Winch is, I'm sorry, I don't know. I've been having these little bit of blackouts. I apologize for that. I told you I have a neurological problem for which I've been undergoing a treatment for the last 30 years. And my doctor tells me that I'm a human marvel, that with this condition that I have, I'm still functional, that too as a teacher. I told him I'm not a very good teacher. He said, doesn't matter, but you're teaching. You're able to teach. He says, that's very rare with the condition you have. Anyway, so the political, uh, Peter Winch, who otherwise would be an opponent of Hobbes, has to agree with Hobbes when he says people imbue words with meanings. And they do things because they believe that they are rational. And I told you that there is this instance of a tribe in Africa which doesn't have a word for rebellion, it doesn't have a word for revolution. So, in fact, let's look at it this way. Do we have a word for politics? Do we have a word for political science in Indian languages?
Yes, sir.
What is it?
Politics రాజకీయం. Political science రాజనీతి శాస్త్రం.
Rajaniti. Let's look at that. Raju. Rajaniti Shastram is the Niti Shastra that a Raja, a king, has to follow. Okay? It is an ethic that the king has to follow. Niti becomes ethics and morals. Rajakiya. Rajakiya is the acts of a Raja. So how is that political? It's not. So we find words and we basically imbue them with certain meanings. What Rajaniti Shastra meant originally is not what it means today. So that's what he is saying about justice. Justice is what you think it is. If people agree that murder is justice, then that is justice. And that is the reason why, you find that till David Hume, all Western political philosophy, especially the liberal tradition, refuses to accept ethics and morals. I'm talking about Anglophone philosophers, English philosophers. And if you look at uh, if you look at the utilitarian tradition within liberalism, it's only talking about pleasure. It's not talking about society. That's a very funny thing. It is only talking about people minus society. Greatest pleasure of the, it should actually be maximum possible pleasure of the maximum possible people. Just the talk of people is not a talk about society or its existence. Where is ethics in this? Has Bentham said certain pleasures are forbidden because they are not moral, they are not ethical? No, no, it's like market capitalism. Consumer is the king. People want something, give it to them, make that the law. If people want something, give it to them and make that the law. So, America is a fantastic uh, instance of Christian ethics having been dropped in some states at least. Like Massachusetts agrees to gay marriages, same sex marriages, which is forbidden by the Christian religion. Leave alone marriages, gay sex, sodomy, all these things have been outlawed. They've been outlawed by Christianity, and they are taken very seriously as offenses if you go into the Bible Belt. But if you go to Massachusetts, you go to California, one on the East Coast, one on the West Coast, one in the northern direction, the other in the southern direction. These are all legal. So if we've come to this, it is because of Machiavelli and the method of logical abstraction that Machiavelli has followed, the method of logical abstraction that he has followed has resulted in the kind of world we have today. And therefore, Machiavelli is very, very appropriately called the founder of politics. We study Plato and Aristotle today. We study them out of historical curiosity, because what politics meant to Plato, and more importantly Aristotle, that whole morally based politics, we study them out of curiosity to contrast this amoral, I don't, I suppose you have to say unethical, because you can't say aethical. Unethical as one word without ethics. If that is what we have today, then this is because of Machiavelli and the Prince, which derived from the scientific method and used this logical abstraction to tremendous success. After all these centuries, we are still following Machiavellian politics. Ends justify means, defections, buying of MLAs, all these things that we see, corruption. Corruption didn't start in India. Every time any Westerner says, oh my God, corruption in India is so bad, I tell them this is what you people have taught us. Even,
Sir,
yeah.
why is that the anti-defection law is serving no purpose, though it's there?
Whenever a rule is made, people also learn how to browbeat that rule. Now, the anti defection law, in its formulation itself, has been, not has been, in its formulation itself, it leaves the scope for defection. What prevented Rajiv Gandhi from saying that if you are elected on the party ticket of, say, the Congress party, if you move out and say, I'm going to the BJP, then you're fooling the voters. As it is, this the democracy, I told you, it is called representative democracy, but there's nothing representative about it. I don't want to go back into that. Do you remember the argument I gave about
Yes, sir.
how, yeah, how even those who voted against a candidate also get represented by him?
Right.
Yeah. So as it is, it's a problem. Now,
Mm.
in this, you are telling somebody that if you are elected on one party ticket, then you can't go to another party. That is what the anti-defection law should have been. If you decide to change parties, then make sure that you resign immediately both from the membership, either to the parliament or to the legislative assembly, and recontest the election again on whichever party's ticket you want to contest. That should have been the case. Why was it added? Why was it added that if two-thirds two-thirds of the members, elected members, sorry, not members, elected members of a political party decide to defect to another party, then it is all right? Why? Why is it all right? What is the sanctity of this two-third? Why is it like that? Why can't you say all two-thirds? If there are 50 of you, all 50 of you resign, contest again. Why couldn't we say that? Why was this introduced? And please remember, in state assembly elections, you don't need very big numbers. Two-thirds of 6 is how much? Hmm? Anyone?
2/3 of 6, 4.
Hmm.
4, sir.
Hmm. So is it difficult to get 4 people to defect?
Hmm.
And that can make or break a government, as we have seen in our friendly neighborhood Karnataka. How many people went to the BJP from the Congress? Barely 10 or 12. So they went, and lo and behold, you have this whole thing called a BJP-led government in Karnataka. BJP tried the same tactics. BJP tried the same tactics in Bengal. It thought it will get a foothold because Mamata Banerjee has been there for quite some time now. It didn't get a foothold, and all those people who defected from Trinamool to BJP, Trinamool Congress to the BJP, have gone back to the Trinamool Congress. Why? Because they are so small in number. The BJP was completely ground out of the scene. So they all went back to Trinamool party. So you see the way in which that anti-defection law is framed. It is there to discourage individuals and two people or like that to keep defecting. But it is not a, what should I say? It is not a sincere effort to stop defection itself, because Rajiv
Sir,
Gandhi,
one more thing.
huh,
It was kept out of judicial intervention.
yes, yes, it was kept out of judicial intervention. Do you know how it was kept out of judicial intervention?
By law.
No. By law, yes, but on what basis is that law passed?
Don't know, sir.
Well, the judiciary was told that because somebody went to court, and the court itself, when Rajiv Gandhi uh, passed this law, the court itself, suo motu, the Supreme Court, took up this case and said, why is this outside the purview of judicial review? That is what it asked. Suo motu is when SUO MOTU, suo motu. It's an interesting thing. Someday we'll have a talk about it if you're interested. Suo motu is a Latin term, but it is used only in India. Nowhere else is it used. And our judiciary said, why is there no judicial review for this? And according to the Constitution, the judiciary cannot interfere in the framing of public policies or public policy that is for the good of the nation, good of the people. It can interfere only at one level, which is to see if the implementation is taking place properly or not. Judicial review of public policy is confined only to that, to see if the implementation is happening properly, but it has nothing to do with the formulation. The formulation is the exclusive right of the legislature. Public policy formulation is the exclusive right of the legislature, though it is done by at the instance of the executive. It's done at the instance of the executive, but it is otherwise exclusive domain of the legislature. So a public policy cannot be questioned in a court of law, except to say that it is not being implemented properly. So at the formulation level, the court cannot intervene. And that is precisely the reason why that piece of legislation went through and it escaped judicial review. It wasn't done just like that. It was extremely well thought out. Why two-thirds? Why not three-fourths? Why not three-fourths? Hmm. So all details have gone into it, into the thought process before it became a law. Before it became a law. So the politics that we have, even in India, thanks to the fact that they came from the West, we have this whole thing in India itself. And when people tell me, which is a point I was making, that India is such a corrupt country, I tell people it's not any more corrupt than your countries are. Your countries are far more corrupt than our country. It's just that we are transparent. We are so transparent that you can see corruption everywhere. And who gave us this stupid system of bureaucracy? Who gave us this? This stupid system of bureaucracy was given to us by the British. Just let me tell you one of my plights, a plight that I have been undergoing for the past 2 years. My dad wrote a will. He wrote it in his own hand, saying that the only thing that I have is this house, and I am willing it to my only child, and he can do what he wants with it because he does not have children of his own. That's how he wrote the will. Now, when I go to the municipal office to get the mutation certificate, here is a handwritten will. Okay? A handwritten will is far, far more uh, weighty than a typed will. Okay, a handwritten will. And what does the GHMC tell me? Did you register it? I said, no, my father didn't register it. Ah, then that's a problem. Go get a legal heir certificate. So I go to the Tehsildar's office. He says, we don't give legal heir certificates. I said, then what? Who gives legal heir certificates? Go to the civil court. Go to the civil court. I got, obviously, what will I do in a civil court? I'm not a lawyer. So I go to my lawyer and he says, the civil court rule is that you have to pay a certain percentage of the value of your property determined by the municipal corporation. You will have to pay a certain percentage of that to the civil court. And I said, okay, how much do I have to pay? Man says, first let me get the municipal this thing about your house. What is the cost? So the cost comes, and when the cost comes, he calculates, and I have to pay 6.5 lakhs to get a legal heir certificate. I have to pay 6.5 lakhs.
How is that even fair, sir?
Exactly.
So what if in the case the will hadn't been written and it is you who can acquire your father's property, right?
Apparently
To him.
not. I have to prove that I am my father's child.
Huh.
Hmm. I have to prove that I am my father's child. If he died in estate, as it is called, So I told the lawyers, 6.5 lakhs I don't have. I really don't have. So the lawyer says, okay, I'll try to do something at the level of the GHMC. And he was going on. Every time I asked him, he said, this is happening. Finally, COVID came. And then he said, they're all busy with COVID. Then I realized that he was stalling. I realized he was stalling, and I told him, name a price, I'll pay you, but get the job done. I said, yeah, I'll pay you. Name a price. So he starts saying various things. So I told him, I'll pay you a fee of 1 lakh rupees. That's all I can afford. And I will pay you a fee for, you'll be sending some people out. Some palms have to be greased. Okay. So I'll pay those incidental expenses as well. Lo and behold, within 1 month, the property came on my name. And if you think the story is over there, it's not over. I need electric connections, which are there on my father's name, water connection, and I ask for, what do I do to get them on my name? They give me a checklist. It again says registered will. In the absence of a registered will, it is compulsory to get a legal heir certificate. It is compulsory to get a legal heir certificate. So I told these people, listen, the house is on my name. Here's the document. Here's the document. The mutation has happened. GHMC has said you are now the owner, and I have even paid 1 year's tax as the owner, not as in my father's name, but in my own name. I have paid the tax. So why do you need these documents again? No, get the sale deed of the property. They have a long list of 6 things. I can't remember them. And one of the things again is this legal heir certificate. Now I really don't know what to do. I really don't know what to do. So this is how the bureaucracy is. And who gave us this bureaucracy? This bureaucracy was given to us by the British. And that is why I tell them corruption originated in Europe. Corruption originated in Europe. Several times I have told you. Big Pharma is in control of the World Health Organization. We see corruption at this level. Their corruption is at the global level. They arbitrarily say 140 fasting, 140 mgdl reading for fasting is no longer acceptable as normal. It's got to be between 70 and 110. Postprandial up to 200 was normal. They have now brought it down to 150. And metformin sells like crazy because that is a medicine that does not lead to hypoglycemia. If you take certain other kind of medications like glibenclamide, uh, 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 glimepiride, if you take these kind of medicines, then your sugar level keeps coming down. But with metformin, it doesn't happen. So everybody's selling metformin. BP, at one time people said post 35, 140 by 90 is okay. Post 45, even 150 by 90 is okay. Now even if you're 100, it has to be 115 by 75. And I got one reading 130 by 80. Immediately I've been put on metoprolol, which is a beta blocker. That's how it is. So this is the level of corruption of big pharma. Don't believe all that nonsense that Antonio Fauci is talking about this vaccine being capable of dealing with the Delta variant, but not with the Delta plus variant. All that is rubbish. All that is rubbish. I told you, my mother's side, it's a very small family, and two of her cousins and their entire families, including toddlers, died of COVID in May. Totally about 15 people, 14 people. They died in a period of 15 hours, and they had been vaccinated. Covishield. Everybody said, wow, don't take Covaxin, take Covishield, take Covishield. Suddenly Europe, and that's where Covishield was developed. It was developed in Oxford University in collaboration with AstraZeneca, which is again big pharma. Now you want to go to America, you cannot go on Covishield. More importantly, you can't go to some countries in Europe if you have taken Covishield. Some countries are refusing even Covaxin. Why? Because they want that Pfizer, Moderna, those vaccines. because Covishield, AstraZeneca is smaller than Pfizer. Bharat Biotech is what? It's a piddly little company compared to all these. It's not at all recognized. So these people want to maximize. Nobody even knows if these vaccines are working. To the best of my knowledge, they are not working. And people are telling, you know, I say people who have taken 2 shots of vaccine have ended up in ICUs with COVID. And the standard response is it would have been even more dangerous. It would have been even more dangerous. And then I say they required oxygen, they required ventilators. Then they say, but they lived, no? Which they wouldn't have. They wouldn't have lived if they hadn't taken those vaccines. And if they died, then search for comorbidities. They didn't die of COVID. They died of the comorbidities. So that's how corruption is. And that is a result of all this thing that we see in terms of the divorce of ethics from public life, not, not from politics, from public life. Madam, I've read your essay. I need to discuss that with you. I'll discuss it with you.
Yes, sir.
Public life reminded me of that. You're talking about civic sense. So, yeah, so let's not be under the impression that corruption is an Indian exclusivity. It isn't. We've learned corruption from these people. We didn't have this kind of corruption. We've learned it from the West. When we go to do the social contract of Hobbes, you will see that he takes forward Machiavelli's agenda. He takes that forward. Already we discussed the justice thing. We'll discuss other things as well. And when we discuss these other things, you will see that liberalism and proto-liberalism but the modernity and liberalism have created an amoral society, first in their own countries, and an amoral society in every country that they went and colonized. They went and colonized. I don't know if you've seen Konda Reddis, very shy people. They don't come out. They don't have corruption. They don't know what corruption is. In fact, they don't even know what India is. That little bit of forest that is left, that is their life. The Chechus don't know corruption. So this is all because of this wonderful thing. So Hobbes also follows the method of logical abstraction. The difference is, instead of abstracting society, what he abstracts is authority exercised politically. And in doing so, he becomes perhaps the first philosopher to use the term state in the sense in which we know it. In the medieval period, there was no state, there was no politics. I wonder why some of these great scholars like Otto Gierke, Ben, what is that? What Coleman is he? Uh, Ben Coleman, I think. Yeah, they talk about politics in the Middle Ages. And so I bought these books and read them from cover to cover. There's another book that I read. Yeah. Um, I read them from cover to cover, and not once did I find the usage of politics and political. But the book is titled Political Thought in the Middle Ages. Hmm. So that's how it is. So we had to wait for Machiavelli to give us politics again, and in this form that we have. And we had to wait for Hobbes to give us the state, the institution of the state. And then we had to wait for John Locke to fine tune the notion of the state. Yesterday, if you remember, I was trying to tell you that there is talk of individualism, which is, like I told you, that is also an experimental kind of a thing to do. Individualism. Individualism does not rule out society. What it rules out is that individual has autonomy from society. So the prioritizing of the individual, which is what I'll be doing with you on Monday, over the society, is yet another experiment. It is yet another experiment. And I told you that in ancient India, there was individual autonomy. And I told you that you will see this in the relationship between dharma and karma. Those who lead a dharmic life, these are people who have sukarma, good karma. and therefore they reap the benefits of that positively. Those who have dushkarma, and you get dushkarma if you don't follow the principles of dharma. And what are the principles of dharma? None are enunciated. It is left to the interpretation of the individual. It is left to the interpretation of the individual as to what is dharma and what is not dharma. It's not a set of do's and don'ts. If you see the Bhagavad Gita, what is Krishna saying? It is reminding Arjuna that he has to kill his cousins, his grandsires, everyone, because of the fact that they represent adharma. So, killing of those who represent adharma is acceptable. But killing of an innocent man is not acceptable. So, in all this, there is this thing called vichakshana, which is a Sanskrit word, not a Telugu word. Vichakshana and jnana, if you put these together, then you understand what is dharma in a situation. Are you acting as per that, or are you not acting as per that? That is what it shows. And by tying dharma to karma, what are you doing? You are ensuring that people have a fear of retribution. You're ensuring that people have a fear of retribution if they do things which are adharmic. But look at individualism here. Individualism here is creating an autonomy, but without a sense of duty to anything or anyone. That is Western individualism for you. It also talks about individual autonomy. But where is the moral principle that guides an individual? It's absent. So this individual is a completely autonomous agent who is not in any way governed by any particular, what should I say, obligation, not governed by an obligation to others and to society. That is the individualism that got generated through Hobbesian and Lockean thought. And that has been the dominant paradigm. Like I told you, the replacement for classical liberalism came from what should I say? It came from utilitarianism, which is yet again something that does not acknowledge a society. It does not acknowledge a solidarity. So these individuals are completely free agents, devoid of any kind of responsibilities towards the society and community in which they live. That is the contribution of liberalism. The Germans, but not the Germans first, it was Rousseau who tried to reimbue modern civilization with a moral content, but he didn't succeed. None of the moral philosophers in the modern period have succeeded. We study them, but we don't follow them. What we follow? No. I believe in morals, of course. My this thing is dharma and karma. I believe in that. When my wife is not here, let me tell you this quickly. I promised a little girl, this is a story I want to tell people. Nobody is willing to listen. Nobody is willing to listen. Nobody cares. Everybody has their own life. I've been grieving for 2 years without an end. And if anything, my grief has been extending. I told a little girl and her mother that they can stay here. I told her that I'll educate her. I don't know, my wife kicked them out. But I felt it my dharma, my moral responsibility to take care of them. So I sent them a fairly substantial amount of money per month without the knowledge of my wife and my mother. I send them money every month. Why? Because I think that is, I will be leading a path of adharma. I'm already leading a path which is definitely more than half adharma because I've gone back on my word. I've gone back on my word. And the principle of dharma is very clear. It tells you, it tells you very, very clearly as to, not as to, it tells you very clearly that if you have behaved adharmically, even without knowing, it is still adharma and your karma has to be, has to pay for it. I am already a cripple mentally, physically. You just saw I blacked out in the middle of a sentence. I didn't know what I was saying. I had no clue. I just blacked out. Akshay had to tell me what to do. So I'm a cripple. Okay. I think it's going to get worse because of what I did to that poor little girl still loves me so much. I talk to her every day, secretly. This is a story I want to tell people, but nobody is willing to listen. Nobody cares. Moral subjectivism is right or moral objectivism. Now, there is no moral subjectivism. Morality is universal. Morality is absolutely universal. Uh, Nietzsche did not believe in the Christian morals. He did not believe in the Christian morals. Um, and in his attempt to break away from Christianity and to create the Uber Mensch, as you're fond of talking about, he doesn't anywhere talk about morals. He wrote a book called On the Genealogy of Morals, where he criticizes the Christian system of morality. He's very, very critical of it. Morals can never be. Is there any absolute right and wrong? Yes, there are absolute rights and absolute wrongs. There are, I mean, all my cousins who have left their parents here and have gone off abroad, that is not the right behavior. So that's an absolute wrong. There is an absolute right that you have a responsibility not just to your family but also to the whole society. Vasudaika Kutumbakam. That is what we believe in. We don't believe in parochialism. If you go by ancient Indian thought, the richness of it is not found in any other system. The richness of ancient thought, Indian thought, is not found anywhere else. There is no subjectivism, like I said. If it is subjective, then I'll say it is. But if you take it as ethos rather than as morals, the separation happened with uh, post Machiavelli. The separation happened. Social ethos, well, if you talk about, say, something like premarital sex, that is derived out of a social ethos. So that I think is ethical, and therefore there can be differences of opinion on that. But what is moral? Killing is moral. I mean, not killing is not moral. So that is moral, like Kant said, is a categorical imperative. It is a transcendental category, something which is above time and space. Common good, I think, is a moral which is uh, which is an incontrovertible and on um, what should I say? Incontrovertible. Yeah, that's enough. It's incontrovertible. So moral has to be objective. It can't be subjective. Ethical can be subjective, but not subjective to individuals. It is to cultures. It is to cultures. In America, parents are not shocked if their children have had sex from the age of 16 or whatever. So that is okay. They are happy with it. Though they are very confused about it. Uh, so that is ethical, not moral. Anything which is moral is absolute. It has to be absolute. If you're an Indian, then you will derive for yourself as to what is moral. Ancient Indian, not an Indian. Sorry. Does that answer your question
Yes, sir.
to your satisfaction?
Yes, sir.
Thank you. Any other questions?
Nothing, sir.
Nothing from Akshay, nothing from, oh, how many are left? 6. Okay. 5. That is, okay then. Just got sidetracked a bit, but I think it is worth it because we need to understand ourselves. We don't study these to pass exams. We study these things to understand ourselves. And I think if somebody tells you that India is a corrupt country, you should tell that person that we learned corruption from the West. We are in an evolutionary stage. This small level of corruption that we are following today, this will disappear. What Noam Chomsky calls running of a country by corporations and corporate interests, we are moving in that direction. Chandrababu Naidu changed the corruption model in basically in the undivided Andhra Pradesh. There was no taking of bribes, nothing. He made Devendra Gaud the revenue minister. Revenue minister will get to know all about the lands, government lands and all that. And what did he do? They bought up these lands adjoining Shamshabad, Tukkuguda, Nanakramguda, Khajaguda. They bought out all these lands, and also in the high-tech city, Kondapur, Kottaguda. They bought lands by acres for 5,000, 6,000 rupees. Then they said, we are going to put 100 feet road here, and we are going to have offices coming here. Shut up. Wells Fargo will come here, so and so will come here. So that is the corruption model. Buy land for pittance and sell it. What you bought for 5 lakhs per acre, you sell at 5 lakhs per square yard. That's what you do. The reason why Chandrababu Naidu went out of power is this. People saw that, 5,000, not 5 lakhs per acre. 5,000 per acre they bought, and then the price is 5,000 per square yard. So people saw that they'd been gypped. They got pittance, while these were all Benami transactions. Murli Mohan, Jay Berry, all those things. He was the face of this, the actor Murli Mohan. So that's why Chandrababu Naidu got voted out of power. So we will be going towards higher and more sophisticated models of corruption. Just give some time, already it has started it some time ago. It's advancing. Now we have crony capitalism. Gautam Adani gets 150 airports to develop, all because he's Narendra Modi's bum pal. Spice Jet is being kept alive thanks to Narendra Modi, because Ajay Singh, the man who now runs SpiceJet again, he was the original owner, and then he sold it to Kalanidhi Maran, who didn't know how to manage an airline. So when the Modi government came, Ajay Singh took back SpiceJet from Kalanidhi Maran, and thanks to Modi, it is revived. I don't know if you know this. Ajay Singh was the person who gave that slogan, Ab ki baar Modi Sarkar. I don't know if you remember that slogan. That was given by Ajay Singh. This, that is crony capitalism. Ajay Singh and his Spice group are all doing very well, including what was a Sikh airline. I don't think I should keep you anymore. Thank you very much. Very kind of you.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir.
Yeah. Right.